Welcome to Pennsylvania Newsmakers, and as always, thanks for watching. Well, looking to save money on utility bills, and guess what? Gasoline prices this summer. But first, the Majority Leader of the State House of Representatives, Bryan Cutler, joins me. We're going to get into the big issues of the week. You don't want to miss this, and we'll see you in a moment.
This is Pennsylvania Newsmakers, a fast-paced, unrehearsed weekly discussion with and about the leaders who shape your world. And now, here's your host, Terry Madonna.
Well, I'll tell you, there's a couple of big issues that have been percolating in the state legislature. They've drawn a lot of attention. One is the legalization of marijuana. The second is what should happen to the $7.25 an hour minimum wage. And then the big issue, the nuclear bailout, some $500 million that TMI in particular, 3 Mile Island, would like to receive in order to keep that facility open. Sitting across from me is somebody who's going to give me all the answers that you need to know, as well as me. He's Bryan Cutler. He's the Pennsylvania House Majority Leader, and he hails from Lancaster County. All right, Mr. Majority Leader, let's start with the legalization of pot. It's certainly popular with the voters, but yet increasingly there are growing concerns about the effects of the long-term use of marijuana. So if you had to, go place a bet in one of our casinos, I'm not telling you to do that, is it going to pass anytime soon?
Well, I'm not a gambling person,
okay.
But I can tell you, I think as the Lieutenant Governor does his listening tour, I think the fact that he's even doing a listening tour would imply that it may not have as much support as many people think. Mm-hmm. Probably the number one issue that I've heard about is the issue related to driving under the influence and the fact that we don't have field tests for the state police. So I think that one's still got a long road ahead of it.
And there's not a big support for it in your caucus. The caucus, Republican caucus, is in either the House or the Senate. Is that accurate?
I think there's bipartisan opposition in both chambers as we go forward. But I think the biggest hurdle, quite frankly, is how it's still treated on the federal level, and that needs addressed in regards to our medical marijuana program as well.
But a lot of municipalities, the law enforcement folks are, if they find, they pick somebody up and they have a small amount of pot on them, they're not prosecuting them as a misdemeanor. They're doing it, as a summary offense. And so we do have this inconsistency in the law.
Yes.
Which probably needs to be rectified at some point, so everybody's treated equally. Yes, no?
Yes, there are some proposals in the House, currently in the Judiciary Committee, and I know that they're being considered.
I think it's one thing to decriminalize it and decide to what extent you want to do that. The legislature wants to do that for possession of small amounts, and legalization. They're pretty big differences there.
Yes, there's a big gap between there, but I also believe in terms of criminal justice reform in general, that's certainly a small part of it. We have to be smart about where we spend our enforcement dollars.
All right, we have a $7.25 minimum wage. It's been in effect since 2009. That's the federal government minimum wage. All around us, all the states have raised it. The governor would like to do $12 an hour this summer and then head to $15 an hour by raising it 50 cents a year. I think it goes to 2025. Your counterpart in the Senate, over in the Senate, Senator Jake Corman, has said, let's talk about it. So my question to you is, maybe not $12 an hour, is $9.50, $10, $10.20. Is that out of the question, do you think?
Those conversations are ongoing, but I think that I go back to what we actually focused on in the House in a bipartisan way right out of the gate, and that was on workforce development. We have so many jobs currently open. We have more jobs open than available workers, and many of those pay far above minimum wage. I think we should be focusing on getting people transitioned into there and focusing our efforts, our policy, and our government money into ways to train those folks so they can earn far more than minimum wage. So while the conversations are ongoing, I think that the real focus should be on earning far more than that.
So if it moves in either chamber, would you think it would move into Senate first, given what Senator Corman has said?
That's certainly possible, but we're doing our best to work together in the House and the Senate, try to arrive at some compromises long before the bills would move. So we'll keep talking.
All right, one last of the three big issues that nuclear bailout, $500 million. The TMI says we're out of here at the end of September. They'll be decommissioned, and the cleanup will have to take place. $500 million, is the legislature likely to approve it?
Well, I think, as you're aware, many of the listeners probably are aware, there are a series of hearings going on right now in Consumer Affairs on that bill. There's one more hearing next week, right. And at that point I expect them to kind of bundle their testimony together and give their suggestions to the legislature. I will admit my concern from the very beginning has been the tight timeline regarding TMI. Mm-hmm. I personally recognize the impacts that would have on the community because we have the Peach Bottom atomic power plant right across the river from me, right. Where I live, and we understand the economic impact that has, but the tight legislative timeline makes that very difficult.
All right, we're going to run to a break. When we come back, I'm going to ask the majority leader something. I want him to explain this, something called government done right. And then the revenue projections, they look pretty good for the state of Pennsylvania. We'll get to that after these words.
This broadcast of Pennsylvania Newsmakers is presented by the Pennsylvania Chamber of Business and Industry, the statewide voice of business, and by the Pennsylvania State Education Association and Partners for Public Education, bringing the power of a great education to our schools, our students, and our communities. This broadcast of Pennsylvania Newsmakers is brought to you by the Pennsylvania Highway Information Association, the go-to source to learn about transportation projects and issues. Please visit pahighwayinfo.org. And by the Pennsylvania Manufacturers Association. Business in Pennsylvania is our business.
Well, I'm chatting with Bryan Cutler. He's the Pennsylvania House Majority Leader. The Republicans control the House of Representatives in Washington, not in Washington, in Harrisburg. The Democrats control Washington. I'll get that right. All right, Mr. Majority Leader, there's something called government done right. Now, some people might think, really? But go ahead. What's government done right?
Well, government done right is our third theme of four that we've been working through in a bipartisan way out of the House. Our first two were workforce development and criminal justice and victim reform. The third is government done right, and the fourth will be protecting families and safe communities. And this particular effort, as many folks might know, for example, we have 153,000 regulations on the books.
Is that all?
That's a substantial amount. And literally, unfortunately, dozens of laws that have been on the books for decades, some dating back to the early century.
Obsolete, is that your point?
Absolutely. For example, it is technically illegal to play sports games in the Commonwealth before 2 and after 6. John Mysick had made a crack about, well, sometimes their play is criminal, but the truth is those statutes are still in the books. So we've made a concerted effort to go back in, look at all of these laws that are outdated, start to remove them, look at commissions that maybe haven't met in 8, 10, 12 years or more, and reevaluate their purpose. I think that's what the voters expect. That's been the focus here. Part of that has also been some judicial reform bills that are moving out of committee, will be on the floor next week. This is a larger block of bills, and it's pretty aggressive in terms of the timeline.
And that would seem, that should be bipartisan.
It is.
Given the fact that you're talking about bills that I'll bet half the members, if not more, have no clue they're even on the books because they've been there so long and they're obsolete and they just don't come up in people's lives, right?
Correct. And it really goes back to the issue of enforcement and relevance. And in this case, the 12 bills that we repealed, or the 12 laws that we repealed with the bills yesterday, all were unanimous. And I expect next week for many of those to go as well. I think what a lot of folks don't realize is a lot of what we do in Harrisburg actually is bipartisan. 93% of the bills that we passed last session, a lot of the bills this session as well, bipartisan. So I think that's important.
All right. Well, this will bring a smile to your face, this next topic, because in the recent decade we've talked about state budget deficits. We've talked about the potential of layoffs of state workers and program curtailments. But now, given the health of the economy in this state, it looks like the state will end this fiscal year, June 30, with $800 million, and I'll put a plus after that, surplus. Yes, no, maybe?
Yes, those were the official projections as of yesterday. I think that's important because, as you point out, we still have 2 months of revenue collections to go. It's possible they could tail off or increase further. But the important thing is, I think those surpluses are a result of good governance over the last 5 years or so. And a lot of decisions were not easy when we made those decisions.
Oh, sure.
But those policies is what set the foundation for these increased tax collections as we go forward. I think everybody agrees that our financial status here in the Commonwealth, as you pointed out, we argued over deficits and cuts previously. This certainly is a much better backdrop to have to make those decisions. But as we go forward, it's important to also recognize now's not the time to change direction either. The ideas and the policies were put in place that created these surpluses currently, while they're great now, may not last forever in terms of the increased revenues because of what could happen nationally.
Yeah, let me broaden the discussion. The way it looks to this observer anyway is that there doesn't seem to be any, I'll call it major controversies over the governor's budget. There may be a debate over the minimum wage, but he took the shale tax, which he's proposed in every single budget. He's separated that from the actual budget. You got a big surplus. So it doesn't look like we'll get into July and August and September with the budget not reconciled with the prospects for a reduction in government services and maybe even layoffs. Would you say right now that's all off the table and we can relax and enjoy the rest of the summer?
I think that your assessment's spot on. I think the budget will progress much smoother than in years past. And I think that your assessment on separating some of the policies from the underlying budget were important as well. And look, we have regular conversations with the governor. We get along very well. I consider him a friend. And I think we will have the budget done on time or early based on these numbers.
One final question. We elect judges at every level. There's been some folks who have said, well, at the local courts, and by the way, these are coming up in the May primary, you're going to vote on judges at all levels. Bottom line here is we don't know much about Commonwealth Court candidates, Superior Court candidates, Supreme Court. They're the 3 appeals courts. And there's been efforts over the years to say, let's not elect them, let's do merit selection. You'd have to change the state constitution to do that, correct?
That's correct.
Is merit selection going to come? Or are we going to?
That moved out of committee previously. I was the prime sponsor probably the last 6 years or so. I will admit, when I first came to the legislature, I was not a believer in that proposal. But as I worked with our now Attorney General Josh Shapiro, he was also a supporter of it then. I talked to him about it, and I came to realize that particularly in statewide elections, too often we were picking judges based on a couple different things. The money in the politics, the large population centers that they came from. More than 2/3 of our judges come from either Allegheny or Philadelphia
where
counties,
the people live.
Where the people are, but not in the same percentages in terms of distribution. And so the Judiciary Committee did move a series of different bills. One dealt with districts for statewide judges. One dealt with merit selection, which was the one I personally supported. But we'll have that discussion in the upcoming week.
All right, thanks. You're always welcome on the program. My word is I used to we did polls on these earlier, but the folks just don't know much about the candidates. They're not allowed to talk about the issues under the canons of the ethical canons. And so we're electing people we know very little about. I get the final word, don't I?
Yes, you do.
But you're welcome anytime. All right, coming up, utility bills, and we're going to start doing a lot more driving. Gasoline prices creeping up almost $3 a gallon. We'll get to that.
This broadcast of Pennsylvania Newsmakers is brought to you by the Pennsylvania Credit Union Association. Pennsylvania Credit Unions, where people are worth more than money. To find a credit union that is right for you, check out ibelong.org. And by the Energy Association of Pennsylvania, Pennsylvania's energy information source. This broadcast of Pennsylvania Newsmakers is brought to you by the Association of Pennsylvania State College and University Faculties, representing the faculty and coaches who are devoted to providing quality public higher education for Pennsylvania's college students.
All right, summer's going to be here before we know it. That means we're going to do a lot more driving, plus utility bills. What's going on? Residential customers, you're having a difficulty with a utility, what to do about it. Joining me are some folks who are going to help us resolve all of that. Donna Clark, she's the Vice President and General Counsel for the Energy Association of Pennsylvania, and Nicole Grear, she's the Manager of Policy and Research with the aforementioned association. All right, Nicole, let's start with you. Gasoline is pushing $3 a gallon.
Yeah.
And we're all going to pick up the driving, which typically happens in the summer. Gas prices higher, lower? Help us out.
Well, over the summer, nationally, they expect prices to be about average, to be about where they were last summer. But you don't feel that right now, right? Everybody's going to the pump, and it's like, oh my gosh, how much money am I putting in my gas tank? But those are, it always happens around this time every year due to a confluence of factors, right? So like you said, everybody's getting ready to drive, so you're driving more, demand's higher. That means the price goes up. That simple supply and demand kind of deal, right?
Well, what's fascinating, the gas tax in Pennsylvania, that's the Pennsylvania gas tax. Now, the good news is that goes to road and bridge construction, not all of it, but a good bit of it, is almost 58 cents a gallon. If you take the federal tax, it's 77 cents a gallon. So we're talking about what, $1.30 of $3 going for taxes, which does help explain, I think, right, why gasoline is expensive. I'm not saying these taxes are all bad. I'm just merely pointing out that we're talking about a significant portion of it.
Right, and I do think that most people support particularly the Pennsylvania tax because it does go to infrastructure, roads and bridges, which we all know need to be improved. And,
we hear that all, and we know when we drive down the highways and we kind of swerve to avoid the potholes, right?
Right.
We all go through that.
Right.
All right, I'm going to stay with you. Well, first of all, let's start with, there are 3 or 4 questions that I want to get to related to utility programs, but you have a utility problem, right? And you're a residential customer, whatever it is. How do you get this resolved? Is there an easy way to do that?
Well, first and foremost, call your utility company. I think the last time that we spoke with you, Terry, was going into the winter. We were talking about the problems people have paying their heating bills, the federal LIHEAP funds that are available over the winter. That program has now ended, so those funds aren't available. So if you are having difficulty paying your bill, the first thing you want to do is call your utility company, because each of our utility companies, electric and gas, have programs in place to help people who are struggling to pay their bills. Programs such as
we have each utility has a low-income customer assistance program, so that's kind of in the way of making it more affordable. But if you don't qualify, say you make a little bit more than you would qualify for low income, almost all our utilities also have budget billing too. So that's to say, you know, if you're a gas utility and over the winter, wow, you like racked up a lot of heating bills, right? You're trying to keep your house warm, and now you've got bills you can't really afford. If you call your utility company, they'll help you spread that out over the summer months. So when you're not using any gas, you can kind of even out your bill that way.
All right, we're going to run to a quick break. When we come back, I want to talk about efficiency and what that all means and what to do with your household. I mean, every now and then, you know, you go by a window and you feel what's outside coming inside because, you know, they're just not very efficient. And we'll get to that after these words.
This broadcast of Pennsylvania Newsmakers is brought to you by the Pennsylvania Medical Society. Inspired physicians committed to the good health of Pennsylvanians and the advancement of the practice of medicine. And by the Pennsylvania Healthcare Association, the future of long-term care.
All right, we're talking about efficiency and gas prices. These are very important subjects. So let's talk, first of all, Nicole, let's talk about general efficiency. What should people be doing to help reduce? Actually, you're going to reduce the price of your energy bill. Let's start with that. And then secondly, it's going to be much better health-wise. You can give 50 different reasons why that's important.
Right. So again, if you're helping your energy bill, but then, you know, if you're environmentally conscious, everything you do to save energy saves, you know, carbon emissions and that kind of stuff too. So all the utility companies offer weatherization programs, so they'll come in and do a home energy audit to, like you were mentioning before the break about if you're getting air in through your windows, they'll kind of help you figure out where maybe you're losing energy in your house and give you some tools and some practical tips to help you with that. Right. But there's also a lot of rebates. So for your electric company, if you have a really inefficient refrigerator, you could get a rebate to help you get a new one. Same with your gas company for a new hot water heater or a furnace. And both electric and gas utilities will help you get a programmable thermostat, and that could really help you save energy by, you know, keeping your heating or cooling down.
So you're the policy wonk here.
Sure.
So how much? I mean, percentage-wise, is this a very serious problem with this inefficiency? Is it something that we just simply neglect? I know in my own home, I don't think very much about it.
Well, it's the cheapest way to save energy, right? So instead
Translation, save money too?
Right, exactly. I mean, in your home, in your business, I mean, statewide, the more efficient we can be with the energy we're already using, the more dollars we can save.
All right.
Exactly.
Let's turn to assistance that folks can get, programs that people can reach out to, first of all, to learn about it, and secondly, to get assistance. Take it.
Okay, so again, going to your utility in terms of education, whether it's your gas utility or your electric utility, on their website, they will have information about energy efficiency and how you can save on your utility bills. And as Nicole mentioned, there are programs available. There are programs that are dedicated to low-income households that the utilities offer. The state offers programs through the Department of Community and Economic Development, through the Department of Human Services. There are dollars available for weatherization. But in addition to that, all of the electric utilities and most of our gas utilities offer programs to residential customers, small businesses.
Are these complicated to access?
No, not at all. Again, on the website. And for example, if you're doing a project in your house, if you're redoing your kitchen, if you're putting in a new furnace, if you're a small business and you're
I'm going to stop you right
equipment.
Here. So, because you brought up a truly important point, so should folks be, as they start these projects, should they be reaching out to these state departments and other folks to get advice about how to do this properly? Is that what you're suggesting?
I think
to get some assistance?
I think the best place to reach out to advice would be to your contractor, who should know about these programs, and then to your utility company. I think the state probably has some resources.
I got it.
But I think the contractor can help you, and I think the utility company can help you with respect to rebates.
Yeah. We have less than 30 seconds. So the bigger point is, talk to your contractor. If this individual doesn't know much about what you're talking about, maybe you get a new contractor.
Sure, but again, the best thing to do is just be energy efficient from the get-go, right? Is to save money right there.
Thank you. All right, we'll see you next week for another edition of Pennsylvania Newsmakers, and as always, stay well.